Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into, well, one of the most perplexing cases really born from the shadow of 9/11, the disappearance of Dr. Sneha Anne Philip. On the surface, her story seemed tragically straightforward. A physician last seen in Lower Manhattan the day before the attacks,
Right.
presumed to have rushed to help and perished in the towers. But here's where it gets really interesting. What if the truth was far more intricate?
It usually is, isn't it?
Exactly. Involving a contentious legal battle, two wildly conflicting investigations and deeply personal details that painted a very different picture.
What's so fascinating here, I think, is how the narrative around Sneha Philip shifted so dramatically over time. It transformed from, a missing person caught in a national tragedy into a woman whose private struggles were intensely scrutinized in public courts. We're going to explore the evidence, the legal standards applied, and uncover why her case became such an enduring exception among thousands.
Our mission in this deep dive is to unpack the layers of this extraordinary story, examine the evidence from those two very different investigations, and follow the remarkable journey through the court system that ultimately declared her the 2,751st victim of the Twin Towers collapse. You'll hear how seemingly small details became absolutely crucial pieces in a monumental puzzle. Okay, so to truly grasp the complexity here, we first need to understand who Sneha Anne Philip was before these events unfolded.
Right, let's set the scene.
She was born in Kerala, India, moved with her parents to upstate New York. She got her degree from Johns Hopkins in '91, then went to the Chicago School of Medicine, graduating in '95.
And it was there she met Ron Lieberman. He was a student a year behind her.
Yeah, and they bonded over creative interest, his music, her painting. Apparently, she even took a year off, traveled through Italy so they could graduate together.
That's quite a commitment. Shows a strong connection early on.
It does. After medical school, they moved to New York City for internships. He was at Jacobi Medical Center. She was at Cabrini.
Two demanding residencies.
Definitely. They married in May 2000 up in Dutchess County. It was a ceremony combining Jewish and St. Thomas Syrian Christian traditions, which sounds lovely. And soon after, they settled into a larger apartment down in Battery Park City.
So if you look at that snapshot, her early life painted a picture of, well, professional ambition, personal connection, seemingly typical for a young, upwardly mobile couple in New York City back then.
Right, which makes you ask.
Exactly. What details would later emerge that would so profoundly challenge this perception and ultimately define her entire case?
Okay, so with that picture of her life established, the events of September 10th, 2001 take on this huge significance. It's the last day Sneha was definitively seen.
The crucial day.
It was her day off. According to Lieberman, she planned to clean their apartment because a cousin was visiting.
Okay.
She had a 2-hour online chat with her mother that afternoon. And during that chat, she mentioned a plan, maybe, to visit Windows on the World atop the WTC North Tower.
Windows on the World. Why were there?
Apparently, possibly for a friend's wedding arrangements. That's what was mentioned. She signed off around 4 p.m.
Okay.
Her last confirmed activities: dropping clothes at a dry cleaner, then shopping at Century 21, right near the WTC complex.
Right, Century 21, very close.
She bought lingerie, a dress, pantyhose, bed linens, 3 pairs of shoes, all on her American Express card.
Quite a shopping list.
And she was caught on a security camera during the shopping trip. These records, the Amex charge, the video, they're the absolute last definitive sightings of her.
Got it. So, after that, the certainty drops off.
Completely. Lieberman got home after midnight, noticed she wasn't there, but he assumed she'd just stayed out, as she apparently sometimes did.
Okay, so not immediately alarmed.
Not immediately, no. He went to bed early for work the next day. But here's something really unsettling. A mysterious 4 a.m. call was later found on Lieberman's cell phone records. It came from their apartment phone.
At 4 a.m. from inside the apartment.
Exactly. Though he doesn't actually recall receiving it. He speculated later maybe he'd briefly woken up, checked voicemail, something like that.
Strange and potentially significant.
Very. On the morning of September 11th, Sneha still wasn't home when Lieberman left for work around 6:30 a.m.
Okay.
After the attacks happened, he eventually made his way back to their apartment. He found dust from the collapsed towers everywhere because a window had been left open.
Oh, wow. The dust was already settling.
Yes. And he found tracks from their 2 kittens in the dust. But notably, no human tracks. None at all.
No human track. That is quite a detail. So the dust settled after the last person had left or before anyone returned.
Precise.
That sequence of events, especially, that 4 a.m. phone call and the complete absence of human tracks in the dust, that forms the earliest set of truly contradictory data points in this deep dive.
Absolutely.
It's a classic example of how absence can be just as telling as presence, sometimes more so. And it immediately launched two very, very different investigative paths. One focusing on her potential heroism, and the other digging into her private life before that day.
So, these initial perplexing details, they quickly spawn these two vastly different investigations, painting conflicting narratives.
What's the fork in the road, really?
On one side, you have Ron Lieberman and a private investigator he hired, Ken Gallant, a former FBI agent. They took immediate action.
Understandable, given the circumstances.
Lieberman called American Express about the purchases, posted flyers at Century 21 stores. A clerk initially recalled seeing Philip, maybe with another woman. But after Lieberman himself reviewed weeks of videotape footage, he found the recording of his wife browsing alone in the coat department. So that disproved the clerk's memory.
Okay, so she was alone at Century 21. That's confirmed by the video.
Yes. Gallant, who Lieberman hired because the police were initially, well, not very helpful.
Often the case in those early days, sadly.
Gallant found two key pieces of potential evidence. First, that 4 a.m. call from the apartment to Lieberman's cell.
Right, the mystery call.
And second, a security camera video from their apartment building lobby, time-stamped 8:43 a.m. on September 11th.
8:43 a.m. That's just 3 minutes before the first plane hit the North Tower.
Exactly. The video showed a woman, silhouetted but consistent with Philip's appearance, height, hair. She enters the lobby, waits near the elevator bank for a moment, then turns and leaves the building.
And was she carrying anything? The shopping bags from the night before?
No shopping bags.
Yeah.
And she was unaccompanied. An NYPD investigator later reviewed it and believed it was her. The Lieberman himself couldn't be 100% certain from the footage.
Wow. Okay, just 3 minutes before impact, leaving the building, no bags. That detail alone, it really shifts the potential timeline, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
It suggests she wasn't just, finally coming home from a night out or shopping. It could imply she was leaving for something urgent, perhaps heading towards the WTC.
That was their theory. Gallant and Lieberman, they did consider the possibility that she'd fled because of personal problems, but they ultimately ruled it out. Why? Because she left her passport, her driver's license, most credit cards.
Important items if you're planning to disappear.
Right. And nothing indicating plans to leave was found on her computer hard drive. So, their conclusion, based on all this, was that she must have rushed to the World Trade Center site as a physician, to help.
Okay.
And perished there in the ensuing chaos.
That's one narrative, the hero narrative.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you have the NYPD investigation started much later, and it really zeroed in on Philip's life before September 11th.
A very different focus.
They uncovered professional troubles. Cabrini Medical Center, her employer, had declined to renew her contract. This was due to repeated issues with tardiness and apparent alcohol-related problems.
So she was effectively being let go.
Yes. And this seemed to lead to some legal troubles, too.
Yeah.
After being informed about her dismissal, she apparently went out, had an incident at a bar involving a fellow intern. She complained of being groped, spent a night in jail. But the prosecutors dropped the sexual abuse charge against the intern and instead charged her with falsely reporting an incident, a misdemeanor, after she refused to recant her complaint.
Wow, that's quite a turn of events.
Isn't it? And in her personal life, the police report claims she began frequenting gay and lesbian bars, sometimes leaving with women. They also included a claim, reportedly from her brother, that he'd caught her having sex with his then-girlfriend. And professionally, she'd started a new internship at St. Vincent's, but was suspended shortly before 9/11 for missing a required substance abuse counseling meeting.
So a picture of someone under significant stress, professionally and maybe personally.
That's what the NYPD report suggested. On September 10th, the very day she was last definitively seen shopping, she had actually been formally arraigned on that criminal charge of falsely reporting. She pleaded not guilty.
The same day she disappeared.
Yes. And the police report also claimed there was a loud fight between her and Lieberman at the courthouse right after the arraignment, ending with her walking away angry.
Okay.
And it was all these findings this alternative narrative that led the city medical examiner's office to remove Sneha Philip from the official 9/11 victim list in January 2004.
Right, so you have these two completely clashing stories emerging from the investigation.
Diametrically opposed, really.
And the contrast is just striking. The family's rebuttal to the NYPD's version was incredibly strong, as you'd expect.
Vehemently disputed it.
They disputed the police interpretations point by point. They claimed Cabrini let her go not for performance issues, but because she was acting as a whistleblower against racial and sexual bias.
Though the hospital later denied receiving any formal complaints like that from her.
Right. And Lieberman explained her visits to lesbian bars differently. He said she went there partly to avoid incidents like the one with her male coworker, and often she'd just listen to music, sleep on a couch, or even paint with women she met there. He framed the drinking as a temporary phase linked to depression over his job situation.
Okay. And the other claims?
Her brother flatly denied the incident with his girlfriend ever happened and said he never even spoke to the detective who wrote that report.
Wow.
And Lieberman also denied that there was any fight at the courthouse after the arraignment. The family essentially believed the police were trying to, well, maybe compensate for their initial lack of attention to the case by digging up dirt.
So on one hand, you have the private investigator and her husband painting this picture of a dedicated doctor rushing to help. And on the other, the NYPD presenting a narrative full of personal and professional struggles, sort of implying a potential disappearance unrelated to 9/11. How challenging is it from an investigative perspective to reconcile such wildly divergent accounts when there's no clear, definitive physical evidence?
Oh, it's incredibly challenging. And it's precisely where the narrative becomes so fractured, you see. You have official records which themselves can be incomplete or frankly biased, clashing head-on with personal interpretations from a grieving family trying to make sense of things.
Yeah.
Sneha's case really highlights the immense difficulty of piecing together a life when direct evidence is scarce. And the most intimate personal details suddenly become subject to public interpretation and intense legal scrutiny.
It sounds almost impossible.
Well, the tension between that heroic narrative and the one fraught with personal difficulties became the absolute core of the legal battle that followed.
Right. So this highly personal, very public disagreement eventually landed in the New York courts. Ron Lieberman sought to have his wife officially declared a victim of the 9/11 attacks.
Which carried significant emotional and practical weight.
Absolutely. In 2003, his petition reached the surrogates court, that's the specialized court, dealing with wills, estates, and missing persons cases. Lieberman argued for 9/11 victim status, partly for benefits, but mainly arguing her medical profession would naturally, instinctively, lead her to the WTC site to help.
The first responder instinct.
Exactly. Her mother testified about Sneha's mention of possibly visiting windows on the world that day, and what's truly surprising, the author of that critical NYPD report. He testified under oath that he personally believed Philip probably did die in the attacks.
Wait, the NYPD detective who wrote the report suggesting otherwise?
The very same one. Testified he thought she likely died at the WTC.
That's unexpected.
Very. However, New York law has a high bar. It requires clear and convincing evidence of exposure to lethal peril for a presumption of death in such circumstances.
Clear and convincing, that's a tough standard without a body or direct witness.
Extremely tough. Ellen Winter, the guardian ad litem appointed for Philip, basically a legal representative looking out for her interests since she was missing. She introduced the NYPD report into evidence, arguing there just wasn't clear proof placing Sneha definitively at the WTC.
So using the police's own findings against the petition.
Right. And Judge Renee Roth, in her ruling in June 2006, ultimately denied Lieberman's petition. She set Philip's legal date of death as September 10, 2004. That's 3 years after she was reported missing, the standard time frame then.
So legally declared dead, but not as a 9/11 victim.
Correct. And the judge even suggested that an intentional disappearance, or perhaps even murder by someone Sneha might have met during her nights out, were just as possible as her dying at the WTC.
Wow, that must have been devastating for the family.
Unimaginable. And this is where the family found a really critical point of comparison, something to hang their appeal on.
Okay.
They contrasted Sneha's case with that of Juan Lafuente. He was another person initially missing after 9/11, with only circumstantial evidence linking him to the site.
El Fuente, I recall that name.
He was a former fire marshal, apparently struggling with depression. He was granted 9/11 victim status. The main evidence was, believe it or not, testimony from someone who overheard him in a deli talking about a meeting he had scheduled at the WTC that morning.
Overheard testimony in a deli. That was enough.
Apparently so, in his case. The Philip family couldn't help but suggest, maybe subtly, that the fact LaFuente's wife was the mayor of Poughkeepsie might have influenced why his case was heard up there, in Dutchess County, instead of Manhattan Circuit Court like Sneha's, implying maybe a disparity in how these very similar circumstantial cases were handled.
Interesting point about venue and potential influence. It adds another layer.
Definitely. So despite what seemed like incredibly low odds after the initial ruling, Lieberman and the family's lawyer, Ellen Sakar, pursued that appeal.
Didn't give up.
No. And remarkably, on January 31st, 2008, a 5-judge appellate panel reversed Judge Roth's decision.
A reversal? That's quite rare in these types of cases, isn't it?
It is. Judge David Sachs, writing for the majority, called it a disturbing case. He found it highly probable that Sneha died at the WTC, and he dismissed the other conclusions, disappearance, murder, as rankest speculation.
Strong language from the court.
Very strong. He specifically addressed the NYPD report, dismissing many of its claims about her personal life as inadmissible hearsay that shouldn't have factored into the legal decision in the first place.
So challenging the evidence itself.
Exactly. He noted that if LaFuente, with his deli testimony, could qualify, then Philip, with her proximity, her profession, the timing, the unrefuted plan to be near the WTC, should qualify too. He stressed that zero evidence of a deliberate disappearance or any other cause of death had ever surfaced in all the years since.
Makes sense. The absence of evidence for other theories started to weigh more heavily.
It seems so. Now, there was a dissenting opinion. Judge Bernard Malone Jr. argued it still required too much speculation to definitively place her at the WTC, contrasting her less predictable routine and lifestyle, as suggested by the NYPD report, with LaFuente's apparently more straightforward situation.
So not unanimous, but the majority ruled.
Correct. The outcome was clear. Sneha Anne Philip was officially declared the 2,751st victim of the Twin Towers collapse.
Wow, after such a long fight.
Years. And this ruling, interestingly, left only one unresolved missing person case thought to be tied to the WTC attacks. A man named Fernando Molinar, a Mexican immigrant who went missing around September 8, 2001. He'd told his mother he'd just started a new job near the WTC. His petition for 9/11 victim status was also ultimately rejected.
Fascinating. This whole legal section is crucial for our deep dive, really. It just illustrates the incredibly high bar for establishing facts legally, especially for something as profound as a presumption of death tied to a specific catastrophic event.
Absolutely.
And it highlights that constant tension between personal privacy, all those details dragged out, and public accountability, or at least public record. And ultimately, how judicial interpretation, how judges weigh circumstantial evidence can profoundly impact a family's ability to find closure and, importantly, honor their loved one in the way they feel is right.
So what did this all mean for the Philip family and for Sneha's legacy? The appeals court decision brought, well, a profound form of legal and emotional closure. But of course, the story doesn't entirely end there.
The practical implications.
Right. The ruling meant Sneha's name could finally be added to official 9/11 memorials. However, no victim compensation fund money was available. That fund had actually closed back in 2003.
Okay, so recognition but not financial compensation at that point.
Correct. A specific memorial was established for her at Dutchess Community College, near where her parents lived. And her family chose to bury an urn containing ashes collected from Ground Zero near their home as a symbolic resting place.
A way to connect her to the site.
Exactly. In July 2008, the city officially added her name to the list of 9/11 victims.
Making it official.
It's important to remember, though, over 1,000 9/11 victims still have no physical remains identified. Sneha is among them. Her family had held out hope for a time that maybe her jewelry, including some diamonds she often wore, might eventually be recovered from the debris at Ground Zero.
That must be incredibly hard, the lack of physical remains for so many families.
Unimaginably so. Today, at the National September 11 Memorial and Museum, Sneha Philip is memorialized on panel S66 of the South Pool, alongside others lost in the South Tower or from the ground response.
So her place is secured there?
Yes. Her parents, as a continuing tribute, still keep her childhood room in their Poughkeepsie home exactly as it was when she lived there. They visit the memorial in Manhattan on her birthday each year.
A living memorial in their home.
And Ron Lieberman, her husband. He remains incredibly close to his former in-laws. They actually encouraged him to move forward, and he remarried in 2010.
Good to hear there's still that bond.
Yeah. And finally, there's a philanthropic legacy. 2 memorial funds were established in Sneha's name back in Kerala, India, where she was born. One helps pay for medical treatment for indigent patients, and another was set up by the Martama Doctors Association.
So her memory lives on through helping others, reflecting her profession. Her story, it really raises an important question for all of us, doesn't it? About how we collectively remember and reconcile with these enormous tragic events. Sneha Philip's case isn't just about a disappearance, it's really a testament to the perseverance of a family fighting for what they believed was the truth, fighting for recognition.
Yeah.
And it reveals the incredibly complex legal and personal dimensions involved in finding closure, whatever closure means, after such a cataclysmic event. It just underscores how the threads of one individual's personal life and a huge national tragedy can become so completely, inextricably intertwined in the fabric of history.
Sneha Anne Philip's story is just such a compelling reminder that even within these widely known tragedies, these events we think we understand, the individual narratives can be incredibly complex, layered, difficult. It really challenges us, I think, to look beyond those initial assumptions, the easy answers, and consider the full, often messy spectrum of human experience.
Absolutely. And the legal journey for Sneha's status, from that initial denial based on the NYPD report to the final, highly probable declaration by the appeals court, it underscores how truth, or at least legal truth, can be constructed from circumstantial evidence, from competing interpretations, even when you lack that definitive physical proof.
Right.
It leaves us, and maybe you listening, to consider just how much certainty we truly need to accept a conclusion, especially when it concerns a life lost and the collective memory of something like 9/11.
Her case and that whole years-long journey just to have her recognized. It invites you to reflect on the nature of evidence itself, the enduring power of personal narrative against official accounts, and the lasting ripple effect of historical events on individual lives and families. What stands out to you from Sneha Philip's Deep Dive? Join us next time for another Deep Dive, where we'll continue to explore more fascinating stories and complex topics.